Thank you. I know you've had a couple of very long weeks. I'm about to support this, but I do want to say at the very beginning my disapproval of the president's policies in the Middle East. And I believe that part of the reason we're having difficulty rallying an international coalition is because they don't see the United States having led on this until recently. But that said, as a veteran of the military, as a current serving military pilot in the Air National Guard, I also am war-weary, as many Americans are war-weary. But I want to remind Americans of what one of my favorite presidents, Ronald Reagan, said. If we want to avoid war, he said, war begins when governments believe that the price of aggression is cheap. And I think that's a situation we find ourselves in Syria now. In fact, in listening to some of my colleagues, it's been amazing to me that we are seeming to paralyze ourselves into inaction, running through every potential scenario that could occur in this. And it makes me wonder, God help us if we become a country that can't do the right thing because we paralyze ourselves to inaction. What I've got here is a picture that I think everybody needs to see. This is a picture of Syrian children, many of which the Secretary said earlier, about 400 some, died in at least just this one chemical gas attack. And if we don't do anything about this, you can ensure that maybe even the kids in this picture, or definitely other kids, will die from the same attack. I want to very quickly read to you the effects of sarin gas, and I want you to look at these children and understand that children have gone through this. The mild effects of sarin exposure is runny nose, watery, burning eyes, small pupils, eye pain, blurred vision, drooling and excessive sweating, cough, chest tightness, rapid breathing, diarrhea, nausea, vomiting, abdominal pain, increased urination, confusion, drowsiness, weakness, headache, slower fast heart rate, lower high blood pressure. Exposure to large doses of sarin, like we saw in Syria, loss of consciousness, convulsions, paralysis, respiratory failure, which is a polite way of saying you suffocate to death while you're aware that you are suffocating to death. What we're talking about is a discussion of what the international community and the United States of America in the goodness of our heart has determined is the right thing in an area that we can affect. Can we ban all artillery shells? We can't. Can we ban all war? We can't. But if we can stand up and say that chemical weapons have no place in this world and we can do something about it, God help us if we don't. And I would remind folks, and I will ask you all to comment on this eventually, from 1991 to 2002 or 2003, we maintained 2 no-fly zones over Iraq under bipartisan administrations because of our disdain for chemical weapons. And most people would have agreed that what we did over northern and southern Iraq was the right thing to do because Saddam Hussein gassed his own residents. This is not the first time America has put down a red line on chemical weapons. I've heard people say that this is the president's red line. It's not the red line of the United States of America, and you just have to look at history and know that it is. And I'm also reminded of what President Clinton said when he was asked what his one regret was for his time in presidency. He said, "My one regret was inaction in Rwanda." And I wonder in 20, 10, 50 years, what are we going to say if we did nothing about the gassing of thousands of people in Syria? Now, I just have a couple of questions. I've heard some people say, and it's really bothered me, they say that if we go in and we strike Assad and make him pay for the use of chemical weapons more than any benefit he gains, that we are acting as, quote, Al-Qaeda's Air-force. And I believe that is a cheap line by some people to garner headlines and not a serious discussion of what's going on in Syria. So, Mr. Secretary Kerry, if you'll start, what's your thought on the comment of the cheap line of Al-Qaeda's Air Force in dealing with the opposition and in punishing an evil man for using evil weapons?
Well, Congressman, your comments have been very eloquent and I think very, very important to this discussion. And I'm confident I join the General and Secretary Hagel in thanking you for your service, a willingness